Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is the Get Up and Dad podcast, the show where we interview hardworking parents doing incredible things. This can be anything from a super duper tech dad to a busy business mommy vlogger.
Let's get up and dance!
Today on the show, we have Claire Bowes. At 15 years old, a day in August 1998, a bomb went off, ripping through her hometown, killing 29 people and injuring hundreds. Unfortunately, that day, Claire lost her sight. Between then and now, Claire has finished her education, got married, set up her own business, and became known as Mum. Claire, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. Just to give people some context, can you tell us how many kids you have and how old are they?
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The boys are almost 12, 9, and my little girl is 6.
So let's start at the beginning. You're 15 years old, you're up to town, and the bomb goes off. What happened at that point?
I remember absolutely everything from that day. I lost my sight instantly. I didn't realise the extent of my injuries at the time. I genuinely at that stage just thought I had like dust or dirt or something in my eyes. I really didn't know what had been done. I was taken from there out to our local hospital, and then from there I was airlifted to Belfast, where I was taken straight to the Royal and taken straight into theatre. And everything is vivid. Like, I could still tell you the socks I was wearing on that day, which is funny. You know, I remember every detail, remember everything of the morning, and all the events leading up to the bomb going off, and I remember everything after until I got to the Royal, and then I suppose it was a bit hazy then after that. But I just remember the chaos as well, you know, the sound of the chaos in the town after the bomb exploded. And again, I wasn't aware for several days afterwards the sort of the extremity of what had happened in Omagh. I kind of wanted to just to be able to hide away from it all. I sort of suppose I wasn't ready to deal with it as such. And I knew people had lost their lives, and I knew of people that were injured, and quite badly injured, but I wasn't ready, I suppose, to deal with the full impact of what had happened.
And, you know, so what happened the few days after then?
Well, I was taken straight to theatre in the Royal, and at that stage, basically what had happened to me, I've only 2 marks on my body. I have one small scar on my chin, where I was hit by a piece of shrapnel, and then my only other injuries on my whole body were across the bridge of my nose. So what happened was a piece of metal the size of a matchbox went across the front of my left eye and was embedded behind my right eye. So when I went to theatre that night, their main concern was to remove the piece of metal. You have 2 main arteries that run behind the bridge of your nose, and this piece of metal was lodged between those 2 arteries. So I'm very fortunate to still be here. So their main concern that night, as I say, was to remove the piece of metal. I remember waking up in the ward. I knew I had bandages over my eyes. Mummy and Daddy were both there with me. A very good friend of mine, his sister was badly injured, so he was spending a lot of time in the hospital, obviously, with his family. And so he would have come up and spent a lot of time in my room. And as I say, I wasn't aware of what was going on in the outside world because I didn't really want to know. I had a lot of visitors, and you know, to be honest, it was ignorant bliss as such. You know, what the one thing I didn't eat. I had no appetite. I never felt hungry. which was obviously the shock of it all. And the other thing I remember is I was afraid even to get out of bed. Obviously, this was the impact of having no sight. I still wasn't aware of the long-term injuries. My consultants weren't at that stage either. So I was initially in hospital for 2 weeks, and during that time I had 2 more surgeries. The second basically was where they wanted to just go and see what they had done and make sure they had done everything that they could. And then the third, which at that stage was probably the most traumatic at 15, as you can imagine, they had to remove my right eye because it was so badly damaged. And as you can imagine, at 15 years of age, I was absolutely gutted at the thought of only having one eye. Like, I didn't realise then I would never see again. So it was, it was those 2 weeks. I mean, as I say, I didn't get out of bed for at least a week. And I remember the first time that I walked down the corridor to go to the bathroom. I had a nurse on one side of me and my friend on the other, and we walked so slowly, and I was holding on to them so tight. I thought, I'm never going to be able to cope with this, because it just was so alien. So I initially, as I say, had 2 weeks in hospital where I had 3 surgeries, and then I was home for about a week or 10 days, which in hindsight was kind of a good thing, because it sort of gave me that insight into how, like, I was trying to manage at home with no sight. Like, I still obviously lived with my parents, and I'm the oldest of 5 children. So the youngest in our house was only 5 when I lost my sight. So, it was the whole family had to adjust. And after about 10 days, I actually had to go back into hospital to have a final surgery to try and restore some sight in my left eye. But having that bit of time at home, I suppose it kind of got me used to how I could actually manage to get around and find my way around our own home. So I had that surgery on the 11th of September 1998. And I remember when I woke up after the anaesthetic, there was quite a few of my family members there. And I just remember thinking to myself, things must not went as according to plan. But obviously the effects of the anaesthetic, I wasn't in much form for talking or whatever. And the next day my consultant came in to see me. He wanted to tell me himself the news that the operation hadn't been a success. And I didn't know how to feel at the time. And after he went, Mum and I were sitting talking, and Mum said, like, how do you feel about this? And I said, I really don't know. Because I suppose that was the first time that it was kind of like, right, this is it. This is how it's going to be. Whereas up until that point, there was always that, I suppose, glimmer of hope that I would get some vision back. So, Mum said, well, Claire, we have 2 ways to look at this. She said, we can sort of lie down and feel sorry for ourselves. And straight away I went, no. And she said, well then, Claire, we don't really have a choice. We have to learn to get on with it. And from that moment, that's what I've tried to do. And it hasn't always been easy. And it still has its challenges. But as I say, being a stubborn teenager, I think was what stood by me at the time, because I suppose it just made me determined that I was going to make the most of what I still had.
Things always haven't been easy. What can you tell me some of the things that have been difficult?
Well, even that initially when I first went home, like, I had to learn to do everything again. Like, even things like making a cup of tea. I had to learn to do that for myself. In a totally different way. I always enjoyed to cook, and so everything, obviously, all those things had to be done in a different way, and had to find new ways to do it. Even things that we take for granted, like telling the difference in shampoo and conditioner in the shower. If they were both the same bottle, and even like, I had a specific place for my toothbrush in the bathroom. And my younger siblings had to learn quite quickly not to leave things lying about. I couldn't go out on my own anymore. I didn't want to go out on my own. I didn't want to be on my own initially. After I lost my sight, I was just too scared, and I don't know why. And even then, when I returned to school, I had to learn completely new ways of doing everything. I mean, looking back again, like I went back to school after Halloween, but thinking about it now, I just wanted normality. I just wanted things to be back to how they were before the bomb. So I went back to the school that I had been attending in Omagh, and they suggested that I took a year out, but to allow me to adapt and adjust to everything. But my sister was a year below me in school, so I mean, you can imagine I wasn't keen on being in the same year as my younger sister, and I didn't want to leave my friends behind either. So I returned to school after Halloween, and that was my GCSE year, and I took 6 of my GCSEs that year. And all during that time, I was learning Braille, I was learning to touch type, all these new skills that I would need. I suppose one of the things that even still is a struggle at times, but I try not to make it be, is like I can't just head off for a walk on my own, or I can't just nip out in the car or things like that. But you find ways of dealing with it, and making it work, and like even in terms of in the kitchen and things like that, like I still do burn myself from time to time. I have quite a few injuries over the years where I've walked into open doors or things, and that still happens, and it's still really frustrating when it does happen. But I mean, it's just, those are sort of, I don't let them annoy me too much.
Yeah.
It's, so there's those kind of things. I suppose even now, with the homeschooling and with the children being at home, one of the things I'm finding a big struggle with that is, like, my youngest is only 6. So if I'm sitting doing work with her, I can't read sort of the page, what the instructions are on the page, to try and explain it to her.
Yeah.
So you used to have to call on one of the boys if my husband's busy with work. I have to call on one of the boys to read it to me, to kind of explain it first of all, because obviously she's only learning to read. So things like that. Like, I can't sit and read them a bedtime story. Things like that. But I don't focus on those. We have our own way of doing bedtime stories. That usually involves us making up what's happening, or like as the children, like now with my youngest being 6, like she loves just telling me what's happening and trying to work out the words and read it. So we find different ways of doing it, but that's it. It's all about finding coping strategies rather than dwelling on the things that are really challenging or that I can't do.
You ended up going to university, right?
Yeah.
What uni did you go to?
I went to Queen's.
Queen's. And what was it like going off to university then?
I mean, again, I as I say, when I lost my sight at 15, I didn't want it to impact my life. Never once did I think, oh, I won't be able to go to university or things like that. So I just followed the path like that all my friends were following. I knew I wanted a career in music. I knew it was music I wanted to study. So even when I went back to school to do my GCSEs, I knew I needed 6 GCSEs to get back into school to do my A-levels. So I only did 6 subjects, and that allowed me time in my schedule during the day to learn Braille and to learn how to touch type and general rehabilitation things, like using a long cane, which I wasn't that keen on at the time. But I had, all those skills. So I did my 6 GCSEs, and then I went on to do my A-levels and got offered a place in Queen's and got the grades that I needed to get in. So like during my, I suppose the one thing that I had to think of during that last year of school, what that no one else really had to consider was like up until that point, I had a classroom assistant who, oh, I got a taxi to school. The classroom assistant met me, and she was literally with me all day, or one of my friends. So I had no issues getting around school. Taxi took me home again, and then I would have had one of my friends or my family there if I wanted to go out and about.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was getting ready and thinking of university, none of my friends wanted to do the same degree as I was doing, or as I wanted to do. So that's when I looked into getting a guide dog.
Okay.
So literally finished my A levels in June, and the very next day went off to train with my guide dog in Belfast. Um, so that was, I suppose, something different. That I had. Yeah, I think I was actually the first. I think he was the first guide dog to attend Queen's, is what I was told at the time. But he gave me a whole new lease of life, and I lived in Stramillis and studied at Queen's, obviously, and the guide dog trainer said to come and teach me the routes and teach Benny, the guide dog, the route, of where I needed to go and things like that. And I remember the first time being out with Benny on my own and just thinking, this is brilliant. I can actually go out on my own. So going to uni was great. I mean, my uni experience was pretty much the same as anybody else's. Had a ball. Did what I needed to do to get through my degree. Really enjoyed my degree. Partied probably too hard, like we all did. But it was like I loved my time in uni.
Brilliant.
Shared a house with Ryan, my now husband, and a friend, and we just the usual student life, and really enjoyed it, and enjoyed the whole experience.
So how did you end up setting up Oma Music Academy then?
So at the time when I was doing my music degree, I had thought of a career as a music therapist, and at that time you had to be 25 to do your music therapy qualification, because you had more life experience. So I was graduating at 21. So I had 4 years there to kind of try and fill before I would apply for the music therapy qualification. So I had went and done a bit of travelling. Ryan and I went to America for about 6 weeks, and did a bit of travelling stuff, and it was brilliant, and came home, and it was kind of like, right, what next? So my piano teacher had actually told me about a course that the Royal National Institute of Blind People were running, a 1-day course where a music specialist was over talking about music and children with sight loss and complex needs. So I thought, right, this will be really good for when I get onto my course. And anyway, when I was there, I got talking to a few other people, and I actually started volunteering for RNIB. At that stage, I couldn't find work. That was the one time, I suppose, that it really hit me that my sight loss was going to impact my future, because I couldn't find work at 21 when I came back from America. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I couldn't just go and get a job in a shop like a lot of my friends would have done. I couldn't get a job in a pub, or anything like that would just tie me over. So my options were quite limited at the same time. So I started volunteering with RNIB, and I loved what I did. It was it's called the Eye Care Liaison Service, and I was based in the eye clinic in the Royal, actually, where I had been as a patient. And the role was offering emotional support and advice, and on a referral to people that had lost their sight or were losing their sight.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from where I came from, like, it was a job that I felt so privileged to do. And I often thought, if someone like my role had been available when I lost my sight, it would have been great to sort of know what was out there and where to turn. So I volunteered for a few months, and then a job came up in that. And I actually worked as an eye care liaison officer for 7 years. And I absolutely loved what I did, and had no desire to go and do music therapy. still played piano for fun and stuff. And we were living in Belfast at the time, and we had got married and had our first child. And then it was while we were having our second son, we moved back home to Omagh. And I just started thinking again about my music and how I really would love to be working in music. And I always had this kind of idea in my head. I was very shy as a child and hated performing and playing in front of people. And then I had opportunities to do it when I lost my sight. And I did it, but I didn't enjoy any of them because I suppose I just got myself so nervous. And I thought of how I would love somewhere where people could come and feel like they were part of something bigger, you know, so they would be learning lessons and have opportunities to perform, and tutors would feel like they were part of something bigger rather than working in isolation. And so I mentioned it to my husband at the time, and he was saying, yeah, it's a great idea, you know, why don't you, and whatever. And so I started really exploring it when I was on maternity leave. Like, you think you have so much time, but I managed to get time to sort of look into it a bit more. And then work offered me a job covering the areas around Omagh and Enniskillen. And I thought, that's too good an opportunity to pass up on. And at this stage, the two boys, like, they were both under 2.5. And so I was working 4 days a week. And I remember one morning, because Ryan was working, he worked out of Omagh, so he was away in the morning before the boys got up. So I'd have been getting me and them ready in the mornings. And everything was always a rush, like it is as a parent. And then, you know, rushing to get them out the door, and we weren't in till after 5, and then it was just constant, and then they were into bed, and I was like, no, there has to be more to life than this. And I just knew I needed to cut ties, and that was the only way I would actually look into opening my business. And I talked myself in and out of it many times. You know, obviously there was that, like, getting your pay at the end of every month, your paid holidays, not having to worry where money was coming from 1 month to the next, all those things. You know, the boys were both young. Is it going to work? Obviously, because the hours I would have to work are more, you know, because we're busiest when the schools finish from 3 o'clock. And I was talking to Ryan one night, and I was like, will I do it or will I not? You know, what do you think? And he said, you have to do it. He said, you know, if you try it and it doesn't work, well, then you've tried and you know you've given it a go. But if you try it and it does work, then happy days. And like, we're now in our 8th year of business. And I absolutely love it, and I'm so glad that I did it. So literally, I handed in my notice to my permanent job in October of 2012. And it took me months to admit to people that I was actually going to open my own business. So I spent that time from October through to August 2013. I spent on sort of doing, like, I had no business experience whatsoever, but I knew I could learn it.
Yeah.
I had an idea. That was all I had. So I went to my local enterprise centre and, you know, basically said, this is what I want to do. And they helped me through the whole planning process and everything. And it is the best decision I ever made. And I just absolutely love what I do. And again, it's just something I just love, having the opportunity to teach and work with all the people that I work with.
What advice would you give to your kids if they wanted to start their own business?
Don't. Nobody joking. It's a lot of work. Like, it's not just a Monday to Friday 9 to 5. I don't even know. I don't even want to think about the amount of hours that you kind of need to put into it.
I mean, what would your daily kind of routine, hourly or work hours be, kind of such?
Well, it's funny, you know, because, you know, be chatting to people and they'll be, what time do you start teaching it today? I'll start at 3. Oh, lovely, wee morning to yourself. And it's got to stage I just go, yeah, Whereas they don't realize, because essentially I'm kind of trying to I'm doing two roles within my business, because I teach about 35, 36 students myself on a weekly basis. So I have all the lesson planning and things to do for their lessons and their progress. I'm CPD, in terms of developing as a teacher, so I'm doing lots of work on that. And then there's all the general business stuff that needs done on a daily basis. So, like at the minute, really, I am not getting a lot of time to work on my business. I have found what works for me actually, which isn't really ideal, is I have started waking at 5:30 in the morning, just naturally myself. And I get about an hour and a half to 2 hours before anybody else wakens in the house. Because once the children get up and it's schoolwork, then that takes up most of the day. Yeah, until I start teaching. Sundays I do take a couple of hours to plan for my lessons during the week, because again, it's the only chance I have. But when the children are at school, I try and get most of my admin tasks and things done, in the mornings before I go into work, before I go in and start teaching and deal with those things. And I only teach, I do 4 days a week, I don't teach 5 days. And that's mainly for the balance too with the children.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of evenings I don't get home till they're in bed really. So I really do feel like I'm missing out on them in that way. So I don't teach at all on a Thursday. So a Thursday I generally would get all my admin work done on the Thursday when they're at school, and then when they come home, that's it. I just have time to be mummy. So it's all about balance. I mean, again, I take quite a bit of time off in the summer to spend with them and things like that as well. So it's, it balances out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. I feel exactly the same. I'm up at 5:30 as well, purely for the simple reason of being able to get a few hours to get ahead of myself for the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even having to schedule this podcast late at night, it's the only time it's the only time it could work for me. I know. Currently, and because the kids aren't at school, it's just been so difficult to try and, I don't know. I mean, I do the school run as well, and it's so difficult to try and get into a new routine because they're home. I don't know. It's just, and then my wife's working too, so it's just completely all over the place,
Yeah, and you try and tell yourself we've so much to be thankful for. We're both still working. There's so many that out there that aren't in this position, and but it's still it's tough. I don't think any parent would say different. I decided today that I can't decide which I'm fed up doing more: hoovering, loading and unloading the dishwasher, or cooking, because it just is constant.
I know.
With us all being at home. But it's full on. But I have found that, having that bit of time in the morning, I don't feel as overwhelmed now in the days, because I've had that bit of time to actually work on business stuff.
Yeah, it definitely works for me as well. See, in terms of your journey, in terms of setting up the business, what has particularly helped you? What would you say has particularly helped you?
I don't know. My local enterprise company were a great help initially, and even still, they're there if I need them. Because again, I'm still learning in terms of the business side of it. I actually really, since lockdown, there's a few other music school owners in Northern Ireland. There's 3 of us, and we kind of started getting together just on Zoom and stuff for a catch up. And see what we were doing and what was working and things like that. And it's great to have them that are doing similar work in different parts of the country. And we still try and catch up every so often. We were on Zoom there last week, actually, just talking about how we were managing and what was working. And it can be quite isolating in one way, because particularly at the minute, we're not always included in sort of legislation. So it's should we open, should we not, what should we do?
Yeah.
And it's great to have other people that you can share those ideas with. So that's really helpful. And I suppose just having a good trusting team around you, and I think great support from Ryan, my husband, as well, because like without him I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
In terms of just knowing that everything's keeping going at home and stuff like that, and that everybody's generally been well looked after and happy. I don't know if I could really pinpoint one particular thing, but I suppose just having people that you can call on to talk to and for advice, that you are able to talk to is invaluable.
Brilliant. And how would you say COVID's affected your business? Currently, I mean, has it been difficult? Has there been advantages? How have things changed?
We are pretty fortunate in that, last March we had to make the quick decision to move online, and vast majority of our students were more than willing to make that transition with us, and the tutors as well. Like there's 9 of us all together that work there, and they were all more than willing to move to online teaching, and it was totally new for all of us. Like we were literally all learning on our feet. So the internet has been amazing, like for a lot of things, but it has enabled us to continue delivering lessons. So that's basically from March to June last year. That's how we taught. And in most cases, students were making great progress because they were at home all the time and a lot of their other activities had been cancelled. They had more time to put into their instruments. But feedback we were getting from parents as well was that their music was the one thing that was continuing. And like I know with my own children, like they struggle in their own ways with, like, gosh, as adults we struggle with what's going on at the minute. It's so alien for us. But that's where, even for anybody having your instrument, like that's, that would be my coping strategy. Even still, I just go and lose myself in the piano. So parents were delighted that we were still continuing. And then over the summer, like obviously we were going to be able to reopen in September, but things had to be done differently. So like we now have 2 pianos in all our teaching rooms and a massive screen in between them and social distancing in place, and those kind of things. But it was just brilliant to be able to be back and playing together, and having music in the building. A few times I was in the building during the first lockdown and I was just like, this place just feels so empty. There's no life in it at the minute. So it was lovely being back in from September to Christmas. But things were being done differently. But again, I mean, we would never have thought of, I would never have thought of putting 2 pianos in a room anyway, but it's something that I think we will always have because we love to play duets and we love to improvise with our students. And we used to do it on one piano, so I would have used the bottom half and the student would have used the top half. But now with us having the 2 pianos, it means the student can use the whole piano rather than being just stuck to one part of it. So then from after Christmas, we've gone back online. And I do find that a lot of our students are just, I think, tired of screens at this stage. I think the schools this time, I know we've found it with our own children, like the schools are fantastic at providing support, but I think because everybody now is much better prepared in terms of what they can do online, for a lot of our students, their online schedules are a lot more, like they have a lot of live classes where they maybe didn't have from March to June. So they're getting weary and they're getting tired on Zoom, and they're finding that their concentration's not the same for their instrument. But that's where it's important to like take a sideways step, where they can still enjoy their instruments, and enjoy escaping from this crazy world that we're all in at the minute and just make music. I think the one thing that it has shown us is that how easily we can deliver lessons online, and I think that's always going to be part of what we do from now on. So it hasn't totally, been a negative thing. I suppose it's made us expand and widen our horizons.
And I mean, my job's primarily I'm a camera operator. One of the things I had to do in the middle of lockdown was, or in the middle of whenever, not lockdown, but after, in between lockdowns, I was in filming a live gig so that the person could play the live music on in the bar, to create that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from your perspective, are you missing the live music and having all the everything in together then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And funny, even this week, I don't know what, like this week of all weeks, sort of today it hit me when I was teaching. I was like, I really miss being able to play duets with my students because, a few of them are learning duet parts and things at the minute. But with the delays in Zoom and things like that, on the two ends, we can't play together because it would sound awful. And, even like this was the first, well, Christmas past was the first year we didn't have a live Christmas concert. We did a recorded one, and put it on YouTube, and it was great. And it was actually, again, it was an idea I'd had because I was like, right, we have to do something. We can't not have a Christmas concert this year. But it actually was great because some of our students who aren't keen on performing and would never have performed live at our concert were more than happy to record a video for us because they could do a few takes, until they were happy with it. So yeah, it's hard to beat that live, that live music. But hopefully we'll be able to get back to it on some level in the not too distant future.
Uh, so, in terms of being mum, what would you say is your favorite thing to get up and do with the kids? It's hard to pick one thing, but So
could be 2 years ago.
Oh, go ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, about 2 years ago now, I decided that we were only going to do free things on a Sunday. More so because I wanted the children to realise that you didn't have to spend money to enjoy yourself. Because I think we can all get caught up in that. This was obviously before COVID. This was my idea. Like even things like going to the cinema, you're handing out money to do something like that. Going to indoor play, doing things like that. There's always money involved. So I had decided that we were going to do things that didn't cost money. So we started exploring lots of places nearby and a bit further afield and heading for walks outdoors and maybe going for picnics and, just going to places that we hadn't been to before and things like that and just making the most of it. So that's probably the one thing I love doing with them. I love us getting out in the fresh air and forgetting about all our worries and leaving technology behind us. And it's actually lovely because we just get to talk. Like even there we headed out this evening to, we've a gorgeous forest park about 20 minutes away. So I was finished work at 4:30 today and my husband finishes around 4ish. And I'd said to the kids, I was like, right, 4:30 we're leaving here and we're going to Gortin Glens. And it's even lovely, like particularly the stage the boys are at now, like our oldest is nearly 12, so he's getting to that stage where you get very little out of him. But when you're out walking like that, they tend to talk away. So it's lovely just to hear what they're up to and things like that. So that would be the one thing I really love doing with them, just getting out and enjoying the fresh air and making the most of it.
Great. And I mean, we touched on this recently before when you were talking. How do you manage the whole work-mum balance?
I don't know if I always do.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I have my Thursdays at home. Like I work too late, like Tuesday and Wednesday evenings I mightn't be home to 8:30 or after. And by a Wednesday evening I am so glad that I have a Thursday at home because I really miss them by that stage. The sort of plus side or the upside for me is like I'm not rushing out in the mornings when I'm getting them ready for school. So I get to enjoy that time with them a wee bit more. And this is one of the difficulties I have too with running my own business and loving what I do so much. It's very difficult for me to switch off. So I'm working really hard on making myself at the weekends, like not do some stuff. Like on Sunday there, even for example, our daughter was playing outside, and she's at the stage where she just doesn't like being out on her own. She'd rather you were out with her. So I was out, kind of just getting involved with what she was doing and chatting to her, whatever. And I was thinking about all the things I could be doing for work, and I was like, just Claire, wise up, just enjoy the moment, and work can wait, kind of thing. So it's me that has to make that conscious effort of getting a balance. And I suppose it's taking that wee bit of time, taking time out when you have it and not feeling guilty for taking your time out. And it's easier said than done. But I try and take proper holidays at Easter and Christmas and summer and stuff like that. And, like I don't do much teaching during the summer at all. So essentially I have 2 months off with them. And I do try, and if I am working, I try and do it in like a couple of days. So, a couple of days a week, so that I have the rest of the time to spend with them. But I think too, it's important for my children to know work doesn't have to be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And if you want to do something that you really want to do, you have to be willing to compromise and work the hours that you need to work to allow you to do that, So I think it's good for them to see that as well.
Totally agree. If you had a superpower as a parent, what would you be, and why? What would be the power?
The one thing that I keep thinking at the minute is that I would love to know what's going on inside my children's heads. Because I'm sure, Ryan, you would agree as a dad, like, although they are all reared in the same way, like our 3 children are so different, personality-wise, which is lovely. But sometimes you would just love to know what's going on inside their heads and how they're coping with everything, and to try and help you or help me better as a parent, with how to deal with their feelings and their emotions and what they're experiencing. That, or just being able to click my fingers and be like Mary Poppins, I suppose.
Everything's done.
Yeah.
I think I'd take the finger clicking right now. So what would you say are some of the difficulties, not just yourself, but maybe other parents would have, with visual difficulties?
I don't know. I suppose it's hard to think of other parents, because, without talking to them and really understanding. But I know from my point of view, the one thing is, like, there's nothing I would love more than to be able to see my children and see what they look like. But on the other side of that, like, I understand their personalities so well, and I have an image in my head of what I think they look like. Things like, I know some of the things that I would have found challenging were if they were prescribed medication, or if they needed even Calpol or something, just making sure they were getting the right amount. When they were younger, I was always so worried that they would lift something and put it in their mouth they shouldn't have had. It was just trying to keep things safe for them. As I say, like, even things like making up their bottles and stuff, how to find ways to make that work. But I do, like, there's still a lot of things I do enjoy with the children. So it's very difficult sometimes to think of the difficulties, because I've found workarounds for all of them. And I think the thing about it is, like, when we become parents, like, nobody can prepare you for becoming a parent. And when you have your first, then you think you've it sussed, and then number 2 comes along and they're a completely different ball game. So it's a totally different strategy. So I think for all of us as parents, we have to learn ways to do things. I know things like when they would have a temperature, Like, I know you can get talking thermometers and things like that. I'm not very good on getting gadgets like that. And I suppose because Ryan's here, I don't feel I need them. Um, but, I would be the one at times, particularly when they were younger, I would sit around, I think, they have a temperature. And he would have felt them like, no, I don't think they do. I was like, come on, please check it for me, because I would have known that their breathing had changed.
Yeah.
It had got a bit quicker. And sure enough, yeah, they would have had a temperature. So it's just, I was actually, one thing that I had that worked well for me was, like, at night when the children lose their dummies in the cot,
Yeah.
was no bother to me trying to find it, because I was so used to doing everything with no sight anyway. So I usually was pretty quick at getting on that one. But it's, I don't know, it's hard to think of the difficulties, because, as I say, we generally find ways to work around most of them, if not all of them. But I would know, like, from my children, like, I would, if we're, like, even today in the car, like, my little girl was like, oh, Mummy, there's loads of wee lambs out in the field. The children always think to tell me
Things.
of what's going on around us, because they know, they've just grown up with me not being able to see. And I think it helps them is to be more aware of other people's needs as well. Which is another positive maybe to it all.
It's 2021. What do you wish you knew pre-mum with all the experience you had now?
The one thing is that you just have to be open-minded, and you will never have a tidy house again, and you just have to deal with it and accept it. And as long as everybody's happy, that's the main thing. Your expectations do, I mean, like, have to slip in some ways. Like, they have to be children. They have to enjoy their home. Like, we have currently got a whole Barbie, I don't know, village nearly set up in our hall at the minute. But it's not going to be like that forever. So we just embrace it when they want to do it. So it's just, I suppose, just letting them enjoy these years as much as they can. And I don't know if it's fair to say it does get easier, but it definitely changes. They need you in different ways as they grow up. Like, I remember even my 10-year-old, when he was 10, or he might have even been 9, and he'd asked, could he go up the town with his friends or something? And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I said, I think I'd rather you were a bit older. And he said, but why did you say then it would be okay for me to go to the swimming pool with my friend, but I'm not allowed to go up the town? And I just said to him, I was like, I don't know. I have never had a 10-year-old before. You have to bear with me when I'm trying to figure this out. Because that's it. We don't have all the answers, and we're learning as we go as parents as well. So I think that's probably the main thing, and they grow up far too quick. I mean, that's the other sad reality of it. And I suppose we do, it's not that we wish their lives away, but we maybe don't enjoy those early years and stuff as much as we should.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty I'm having right now is my baby girl, she's teething. And
Yeah.
I just can't get her. I'm just up all the time.
Yeah.
At the minute.
Yeah.
I'll see trying to deal with broken sleep.
Yeah, and it's when you've one with broken sleep and you have the other two still getting up in the morning full of beans and raring to go, and you're just exhausted.
Yeah, you're just afraid of the other two getting up. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's completely different with the other two now, because they're in the video games. They're into making videos with me and stuff, and they want to do activities and stuff, and it's great seeing them grow up,
Yeah,
and getting to
it
that
is.
point. So what would you say is the next big thing for you?
I don't know. I'm very good at living in the here and now, and enjoying what I've got at the minute. I have no big plans for the future. I know it might sound very cliche, but things are pretty good at the minute. So, just sort of want to enjoy it, I suppose. I don't know what the next big thing will be for me. I suppose watch the space. I don't rule anything out. I grab opportunities when they arise. So who knows? Watch the space.
Awesome. Claire, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And for everybody listening, if you want to go follow Claire, go check out Oma Music Academy on Facebook. And if you like this podcast, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.